Welcome to episode 4 of the Liminal Space podcast. I'm Tristan.
I'm Rashid.
So today we're going to talk about being in our bodies and healing. And maybe football is a weird place to start, but Rashid, you shared something beautiful in a football supporters WhatsApp group that we're both part of.
Yeah, so in the group, we often just, most of the time we're talking about nonsense and we're bantering each other about the performances of each other's teams. But every now and then we do have like good chats. And the one day one of the guys asked in the group, he was like, why do we feel it so much when our team loses? And it is this mystery, like football, soccer, sports or whatever, like why do people take it so seriously? And when your team loses, literally some people can actually become like depressed. I've been there. I remember when my team lost a big game in 2006. I was in high school. I was crying, but I didn't want to go to school the next day. But yeah, anyway, so obviously as I'm older, you learn to sort of balance these things. And yeah, so one guy asked this question, why do we feel it so deeply when our team loses? And I was thinking about it actually in terms of our bodies and being in our bodies. And I think that football or sports in general, it does offer one place where, not to necessarily generalize, but particularly where men in society can sort of like be in their bodies, and where it's widely accepted, it's not only for men, because I know my wife, she's a big, soccer fan as well. But yeah, it's this one place where we're granted this place where society's like, you can be emotional, you can cry if you want to, you can lift your hands up when your team scores and go crazy and run around. And yeah, I was just thinking of like football or fandom as sort of the site of embodiment where society says you're allowed to belong in your body, and it's acceptable. And particularly all of this in the context of how we live such disembodied lives in everything else that we do. And I also feel like we can go through the conversation how society is also set up in a way for us to be so disembodied in various things that we do. So all of this leads us to introducing our guests, who are two special people who we have the privilege of calling friends as well, and who we've, through conversation and just different journeys in life, have noticed how they have, in obviously different ways, sought to cultivate, I guess, healthy embodiment. And yeah, I've been so blessed to see both of them living in their bodies and I guess belonging in their bodies. And it's always something for me that I'm like, I wish I could do that more. So yeah, we sort of wanted to open up that conversation of cultivating healthy places, maybe seeking healthy places and ways of belonging in our bodies.
Zach is an artist and local food co-op host. Right now he cares about exorcism, be it queer hatred in the church, imperial imagination from the walls of the suburbs, or of the shame we hold in our bodies. Zach believes wholeheartedly in gathering together over a delicious meal.
Thami is a singer-songwriter and musician, passionate about the transformative essence of musical alchemy. Her current artistic expression is rooted in creating immersive soundscapes that in some way transcend traditional boundaries, with the potential to offer a narrative journey. She hopes to create auditory spaces that encourage restful resistance through self-reflection, while provoking forms of healing. Welcome, Thami. Welcome, Zach. Yay!
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Nice to have you both. So we're recording from Claremont today, again close to the mountain, like we did in our first episode. But both of you actually don't stay in Claremont. You stay in Rosebank in Cape Town. And I wondered if you had any anecdotes from the land of Rosebank. What happens in Rosebank? How did you come to live there? Anything?
I moved to Rosebank having come from Muizenberg. I'm not originally from Cape Town. So
Where are you from?
Kimberley, where there's a groot gat.
Okay.
Die groot gat.
That's not a swear word. Okay.
It's not a swear word. It's so funny. We had a dinner and we were teaching people how to say grot. Because it's grote skier. But anyway, I digress. Where there's the die groot gat. So I'm originally from there. They also call it the Diamond City.
Okay.
Yeah. So technically I'm a diamond. Yeah. Yeah, but I moved to Cape Town to study, and I've found ways of making home here. Moved around, was in Muizenberg at some point, and right now I've settled in Rosebank. I live across from, or basically like a door away from Zach, who's a dear friend. And yeah, I think what describes Rosebank for me right now is just this amazing gift of living around friends and, family that I've grown into. And I don't want to say created, that kind of sounds weird, but I guess God has placed me in a very special place with people that I can make home with in this city, as opposed to home. So yeah, going home warms my heart, thinking about, like, I literally sometimes wake up, I have my back door is kind of like see-through-ish. It's like a window. Okay, it's a window. Yeah, kind of like
Your back door is a window.
See-through.
Okay.
The see-through window. And sometimes I'll sit there, like, when I try to journal and stuff, and I'll look out and I'll see Zach's house. They have like a garden. Like, I get to see a bit of the garden from the back. They have like these beautiful trees and stuff. And I don't get to see the whole garden. I just see a bit of it, and even that is just like such a gift. So I guess, yeah, the location Rosebank it's in a place that's got a bit of greenery, which I've grown to really appreciate. So the people and the area has been quite special to be in.
The lush suburb of Rosebank. Zach, you've been there for longer.
I've been there since I was about 8 months old. I think. I don't remember anything else. Same house up until a few months ago, the beginning of this year, when I moved. Well, Thami moved into the flats next to my family's house, and then that was really close. And then at the beginning of this year, I moved into those flats too. So I'm now even closer to Thami than before. We literally our doors are opposite each other.
Yeah.
Which is a joy.
It
I
is.
can hear her laughing at TikToks and playing on the.
It's not. That's supposed to be a secret.
And how long have you guys known each other?
2021, 2020.
Yeah.
Pandemic friendship.
2021.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it's about 4 years. So
Wow.
Did you
has it
meet
been
on
that long?
Zoom?
Lol. No.
Imagine.
Actually,
We were Instagram friends
yeah.
first.
I was kind of obsessed.
We knew we were
Well,
destined.
I knew his dad, or like his dad. We kind of like, I connected. I found Zach through Craig. And
Craig
then
Stewart, the celebrity.
Craig, yeah, basically the celeb. Shout out to
In
Craig.
some circles, shout out to Craig.
Yeah. And then Justice Conference, I saw some of his work, and I was like, oh my God, I need to meet this human. And it was just like a thing, like in my soul, I just knew someday, it felt like we kindred souls. And then physically, the physical meeting.
Physically, okay, well, I would say from my side, I was also aware of Thami on Instagram. Aesthetics, gorgeous. We knew we were going to collide. And then it turned out we were both in this little short course at Stellenbosch. And
Yeah.
That's cool.
and then after that, I don't know, we just kept bumping.
So tell us about your experience in Rosebank. Zach, is there anything that's, I don't know, you grew up there, I guess. What are your feelings? I don't know. How do you experience Rosebank?
I think Rosebank is a standard imagination of white suburbia in a way. It's not quite the Golden Mile, but it's wannabe. I feel very fond of. I feel like we've got a little corner of Rosebank going where I know more of my neighbors, and I don't know. It feels like home. And to be honest, I don't think beyond the rest of the houses, or beyond our street, But I mean, we were laughing about the WhatsApp group. There's definitely really, I don't know, standard annoying spatial imagination, security, private security. Rosebank is a white neighborhood, not Mowbray, very separate to Mowbray, and I don't think it welcomes everybody's bodies. Yeah, and we're kind of creating our little corner.
Okay. And if we were to ask, I guess this is for either of you, who asked the question about what stories ground you at the moment. And the idea behind that question is that on the podcast, we treat this space, the conversation, as a liminal and in-between kind of space. And so we try and enter people's stories with curiosity and not being experts, because neither Rashid nor I are experts in much, although Rashid is an expert in music or whatever. And so we're just entering this with curiosity, and I think it's nice to understand, we get to hear a bit more from you when we hear what stories ground you or help you navigate the world. And it can be a current story or old story. And so we're just asking in this moment, what is there such a story that grounds you, that you hold on to, or that helps you navigate the world?
Well, the story that's come up recently is like the dinner that we had this weekend. Zach, he's an amazing cook, and he got the idea to like gather some of our friends and just to have a meal together, and we did that. I ended up basically for the rest of the evening thereafter and the day after just reflecting on it, like not necessarily with profound ideas around what it meant and stuff, but more like kind of almost reminiscing and going back to the feeling I was feeling, or the feelings I had while I was there. This warmth and immense love and joy for seeing friends I hadn't seen in a while, like seeing Zach get excited about like the recipes that he was like conjuring, and like, you know, we had one of our other friends come through and she helped with setting up the table, and we went and like quote unquote foraged some flowers from Zach's yard and decorated the table. And I don't know, just the intentionality around how we set things up, and the meal from its conception, the idea of gathering and being together. Like I was just sitting thinking about all of that, and it was like this very simple thing, which I guess people do, you know, you eat food every day, hopefully, but you know, the simplicity of just being together and having a meal, and that just being something that's maybe created to sustain, that there is something around like being together that is meant to sustain us. And I think that's what I'm thinking back to now, is that I got to do that with friends. And that was, I was saying to Zach, like it felt like a gift. And gifts are things you don't, maybe they're just given to you. You don't have to like work for them. They're there, and sometimes you have to notice or like really lean in to see it or whatever. So I think I was just I was just like in awe, like, yo, I get to like get this. And wow, like, whoa, that was special. And I get to love my friends, and I get to enjoy some delicious food as well, yo. And this gets to be part of my experience in this world. And that felt so sustaining throughout Sunday. I was like, like, you know. So right now, that's something that comes to mind.
I think I've been living in the same meal as I've been planning it for the last few weeks. And then reflecting on it, because it's so like, it's such sustenance. I don't know, like communal sustenance. It just feels like home. But also something about eating together and taking in food together. It was also like coming together after a while. You don't see people, and it happens so quickly, hey. And then suddenly it's been 2 months and you haven't seen people for a while.
Yeah.
Which is a loss. Because I had all these plans about the evening that I was going to ask some questions with every course to help us reflect. But we didn't end up asking the questions really, not much. But it was fine because it felt like the space had done the work. Like there'd been so much work. We spent the morning setting up, and we were like, ooh, this carpet, will it match the tablecloth? Thami has a beautiful carpet collection, we learned. And also just all the work that went into planning the menu and the stories. I was thinking about this as I was planning the meal. I listened to this book recently. It was so beautiful. It was by Sister Maria Grothwell. The Wheel of Rocks. This Wheel of Rocks. Catholic nun in the US, Turtle Island. And she was talking about this moment. She was talking about prayer, which isn't maybe something I think about a lot. But there was this moment she's talking about where she's in a whole situation with a Crow community in, I don't know where that is in the US, but someone says to her they're burning cedar wood before starting their meeting, and then she says, remember to say a prayer over those who are over everyone as you pass them. And then an elder in the community stops them and says, no, the burning of the cedar wood is the prayer. The thing is the prayer. Maybe I could read the quote from that. Now I had to write it in my journal because I've just been sitting with it. Sitting up all night with a sick child is the prayer. Desperately hoping month after month that a son will survive prison is the prayer. Patiently talking through a misunderstanding with a spouse or a friend is the prayer. Salmon swimming unknown miles to the streams of their spawning is the prayer. Penguins incubating the one egg in frigid wind is the prayer. All that exists prays. All the rocks, plants, and animals pray to God. But for me, I don't know, that was a helpful framing. That gathering of people is the prayer.
On this side of eternity.
I want to come back to that maybe a bit later on about that is the prayer for what, I guess, like what is that the end, what is the imagination at the end. So maybe we'll speak about that a bit later.
Okay.
But what it sounds like is the meal, since we are talking about this idea of embodiment with the two of you, the meal in itself is doing that as well. Like it meant people coming together in a physical location, conversing with one another. And that in itself is an embodied act. Like you show up there in your body. And it feels like in 2024, the world has become quite disembodied, whether it is in religious spaces or elsewhere. So I'm thinking about, like, there's a certain type of spirituality, for example, that only concerns itself with things of the afterlife or things that are not here on the earth or anything like that. But also in society, I guess we do a lot of our friendship connections are on social media that are quite disembodied. We kind of relate in texts and pictures and things like that. That is not a physical presence. Or we were talking earlier about, like, in the pandemic when we had Zoom meetings, and there was literally a disembodiment because we just saw people's heads and we didn't know what they looked like for 2 years. And so I'd like to talk about that, for us to talk about that, but maybe to start with, what is embodiment? So we throw that word around a little, and I don't know, either of you, what would you say when we talk about embodiment? What are we talking about?
I think for me, I was saying earlier that I definitely wasn't aware of the word before like journeying in a community where we were kind of like it's a theological school, St. John's Leadership Academy.
Shout out to SJLA
Shout
people.
out to SJLA, our Mensa. So in that year, it was our second year that we read this book by Walter Brueggemann called A Prophetic Imagination, which I was obsessed by. I'm still obsessed. Some of the language that he used was embodiment in trying to expand ideas around theology and imagination. Like, what is how far are we willing to explore what we think we know about who God is and who we are with regards to like how we live and etc. So that space being a theological school, they introduced the idea through biblical text, and the scripture that I remember being used that stuck with me was the one where it says, I don't know what it is, but it says the word became flesh and dwelt among us. And the other translations, like the world became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. I love words, and I think, I don't know, hearing that just kind of like blew my mind in terms of what then I was seeing that I wasn't seeing before about the incarnation of Jesus. And so it felt like that text was expressing through the story of Christ what embodiment was within the context of the texts. Jesus has always, so me at that point, Jesus is always this, Jesus is God, we're in awe of God, Jesus is out there, Jesus is grand. Is that how you said? Jesus is grand or big. But then Jesus becomes human. Jesus is located somewhere. Jesus becomes this human in a body, in a time and a place, and is moving around spaces in a certain way. There's a lot of information about what these spaces are, who he's speaking to. It was just like stories coming alive that, crazy enough, I'd always read before, but never really saw the details that have always been there, and intentionally written. So it was like I would say like a 180 of my theological imagination around, who Jesus is. And so I think that's a marker for me with understanding or unpacking, beginning my journey with unpacking, making sense of embodiment within the theological context and how that informed my life. Because that was or is still something that I draw from a lot, the stories from the biblical text, and then I guess moving from that, like how that would then inform how I was navigating who I am in my body today.
So your faith journey does have quite a lot to say about how you live your life. And that realization would have been then super important. Zach, is it the same for you? In terms of embodiment, where do you start thinking about that or talking about it even?
I think I came to this thing called embodiment, but without knowing the language necessarily. I think there were two paths. The first one was through my queerness, coming from religious space. In terms of my queer body, I was raised in a world which said that I shouldn't be queer. And that was at war with what my body was telling me. This is how I make sense of it now. Obviously, it's looking back to like when I was 16, 17, 15, whatever. But that was a huge journey, right? And I think this happens for a lot of queer people, where you're in this space where actually you don't really have examples in your world which express who you are. and everything about the culture you've been raised in actually says that what you are experiencing yourself is wrong. And so in order to become yourself, you have to choose to listen to your body over what you've been taught culturally. And so that for me, that's been a huge journey. And I think that's why I really hold listening to my body in some ways. I mean, I'm not like some body guru, embodied guru, but but then the other one I just remembered. So that one's huge for me. Really,
Sure.
that's important. I think about that so much, being in spaces that, yeah, we can go into that later. But the other one that I was thinking about when you said, Thami, actually, as I was raised, I don't know, my parents were on all these journeys as I was growing up. So I feel like I haven't had to do some of the work that others around me have had to do. I'm not going to put labels on what that is, but I remember being raised in a church space that made so much sense, obviously, until I went to school, and then I was on the Christian Union Committee, and then I was exposed to these, I don't know all the labels for these things, but a different type of Christianity where things felt really off to me, and I never knew how to say it because I was young. And what I realized was, I think I was really exposed through my parents to, I guess it was liberation theology, which is what didn't make sense about these new Christianities I was experiencing, where it was all about spiritual liberation. And I just didn't understand, because that had nothing to do with, like, people could talk in circles and glory to God and blah, 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 blah about this salvation, and have nothing at all, no interest, except as like a side job in physical liberation, because only the spiritual mattered, as if there's a spiritual apart from the physical. Maybe that's, yeah. So I think those were kind of the two strands.
I mean, it's fascinating. I love this. It's fascinating what I'm hearing, and you can tell me if I'm hearing it wrong, but there's like a wisdom in your body that allowed you to realize these things, and your brain maybe caught up with it afterwards in some instances. So like when you say you could sense something was off, what was that like? Just in your, were you thinking, oh, something's off here? Did you feel like something doesn't feel right? Or where did that happen, if you know what?
It just never made sense. I didn't understand all the focus on these things. To me, caring about church, caring about the gospel, was caring about what's going on in the world. And when I brought up what's going on in the world in that space, it was always met with suspicion, or just not necessarily important.
Breathe. Come make a home in your body with yourself. It is safe here. You are safe here. Your past cannot harm you here. Your future is not yet here. All you have is your breath, your sound, yourself. Breathe in hope now. Grasp at liberty. Make peace with all of who you are. Be carried by the ground that has always supported you. To it you will return one day, but here and now it lifts you up. Commune with it and the air and the light you see. Let go of dead dreams. Find freedom in exploration. Sit in this beautiful space. Imagine shame into beauty. Soak in wonder. As you are returned to yourself, breathe. A later story in life, I guess, as I'm an adult now, is a couple of years ago I was seeing an executive coach, and she asked me a question that I feel like has shaped this bit of my life now, which was, what is your relationship with your body? And up until that point, I didn't have a framework to answer that question at all. It completely threw me. For most of my life, I've always relied on my brain and like my thinking ability, and to think about like, well, your body as even exists as a thing or whatever. I didn't have a paradigm, and that kind of set me off on somewhat of a journey to understand that, or even thinking maybe my body does also have wisdom and can indicate things, has been a massive realization for me, but only now. Like I think I've lived most of my life not realizing that I have a body that can tell me things, you know, or hold information or wisdom or trauma, you know.
Yeah. When you said that, I'm like, whoa. It made me think about like what I also came to learn around, you know, the reality of us living in a world where there are actually different wisdoms, and we just happen to be living in a world where perhaps some wisdoms are more domineering or have influenced or affected us more than others, you know, and so we end up actually trusting our minds as the wisdom, the first point of reference. And then secondly, then we think about maybe my body and then maybe my surrounding. But, you know, for me, I've been on, I guess, also a similar story to yours, like, you know, then thinking, yikes, actually, or I'm actually on this journey of like maybe trying to develop a muscle memory that draws from the wisdom of my body first, and then think about what that is, you know. And it's crazy because the more research I've done and stuff, like the more I've discovered that that's always been around. It's not something that's new, right? Like you know, beautiful communities who've always had the wisdom of consulting with the body or the surrounding, and then, you know, drawing information from that. In most cases, your body is the most truest form of the wisdom, and then, you know, you go from there.
It makes me think about a quote from June Baum, who is Ishka, shout out to Ishka, who's Rashid's wife. Her supervisor had said at a book launch about this idea that there are different, no, she didn't say there are different ways of knowing, but I think she actually said there are better ways of knowing. And I think this is just my opinion, but we've overemphasized, probably from a Western lens, this very heady or brain kind of thinking, and we've neglected other ways of knowing, which sometimes is better, like things like intuition, or like Zach knowing somehow something's off. That comes from somewhere that maybe we haven't always had a paradigm for.
I wanted to just say one other thing, like when we're talking a lot about, like, you know, being in our own bodies, it could perhaps be misinterpreted as that being like a very selfish thing, like now I want to know who I am and I this. But I think from what I've heard, a lot of the conversation is it's almost like this belonging in my own body, and that what that breeds is this knowledge of how I belong to communities, to friends, to the world, to creation, to the earth. And it's such an interesting idea, because I do think a lot of our society is very like, we're in a very like self-help society. So it's like, you know, you must be better and you must be greater. But then perhaps the result of all of that can be often quite empty, even though we may be like, cool, I feel full, then I feel good. It's just a very interesting thing that I'm hearing, like this idea of when you are at home in your own body, it's almost like you find home, you find life that is greater than just your own body. It's almost like your body's like, yeah, man. Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on that idea.
100%.
In the dinner, actually, Thami, you had mentioned something about it felt like home. And then I think, Zach, in a previous conversation, we spoke about this idea of like coming home to yourself, or coming home to your body, or finding belonging in your body as a concept. And I wondered what you thought about that?
I actually think Thami and me became friends because of listening to our bodies. We were in spaces and there was beautiful parts to them and there were hard parts to them. But part of how we connected with another friend was we would always, after being in the space, then we'd come and we'd process. And just, yeah, we had that's how we became friends, was these long processing sessions. But I think at the core of it, what was happening was we were just like safe people to say, whoa, this was like happening in me. So I don't know, I think a lot of it has been trusting the wisdom of your body, trusting that it has something to say, because you can really suppress that. I don't think I'm always a very regulated person, and recently I've been feeling a lot of anger, and it's been such a gift to notice what's happening when that happens. Thami said something the other day about being in certain spaces which are, I'm going to use the word triggering, or, maybe like feel uncomfortable. You can probably expand on this better, but you're saying that those can be a gift, right? Because those feelings in you can be a gift because they're actually just showing you where you want to be, or helping guide you to where you want to be.
Pointers.
Yeah. You said that much better.
Yeah, I was just talking about, like, for me, being home has been like being curious about feelings and things, and not just like tagging it away, kind of therapy things, because that's always revealing of something that can teach you more about yourself and stuff. So yeah. I think for me, similar to Tristan, like I'd kind of lived in a way where I wasn't necessarily taught to embrace like my identity, especially being like Christian and stuff, because of narratives or ideas around, like, they'll say scriptures like, you need to die to yourself, and scriptures that made sense in a certain context, but maybe I guess for me it would be interpreted as like, what you are now is Thami, a new creation, and then everything else is kind of like extra but not as important. So it feeling like when I started to understand this text or this imagination around the world being made flesh and dwelling among us, it actually made me more curious about my identity in ways that I wasn't before, because now I felt like these things were being celebrated or acknowledged. So the story of Christ, who's located somewhere, who has a family, who has a very rich identity, now gives me permission to be curious about my identity in a way that I didn't think I could in my Christian path or journey. So then here Thami goes, like, asking questions about, like, my name, who gave me my name, I'm Xhosa, what does that mean, my clan names, all these things which are such precious things that are gifts for us, like that we kind of like tiptoe around within Christian spaces. We acknowledge them, on that Heritage Day Sunday moment or here and there, but I think have been for me significant things that I've found to be these beautiful parts of me that I get to explore within this thing of like, who am I in this body? What is the story of my dad? What's my mom's story? And yeah, so I think that for me like feels like a path of finding safety again, like, coming home. This thing where these things are not shameful, like, coming home is this thing of like, okay, these things are beautiful actually.
Zach, something that you've taught me from the one conversation we had the other day, I remember I made a note about it, was you said something like, I don't have the exact words, but you said something like, healing is as an embodied act as trauma is an embodied act. Do you remember that?
Sounds amazing.
I think you said something, and I think your reflection was something about how the effect of trauma is felt in the body. And so the healing of that must happen in the body as well. Do you remember what that was about?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the queer journey, where shame is such a huge part of that experience. And if I said that, I was probably, I so much of what I've got on understanding specifically that experience and how it lives in your body is from this book, Beyond Shame by Matthias Roberts. I found it so helpful just because he explains kind of what's going on in literally in your body. I think he's a therapist that works in queerness and Christian and sex, all those spaces. But one of the things that he really explained so well, and which transformed my understanding of my body, was that shame is coded into your body, into your nervous system. It's something that you're taught. So in the context of queerness, you are taught from birth, whatever, that this thing is wrong. And then when you experience that thing, you will experience it as disgust or shame. That depends on what positionality you have in that. If it's yourself, if you're experiencing that feeling towards yourself, then it's shame. Because according to him in the book, when your body experiences something with a certain way, you experience that thing as truth. You don't experience it as, I think it's disgusting. You experience it as, no, it is disgusting. And then if you're directing it at someone else, like, ooh, that's disgusting, but that's literally built into our nervous system. And so in order to undo that, and this ties into the meal and community, the biggest thing that stood out to me is you have to practice that thing that you're ashamed of as beautiful. You can recode your experience of something. Who I am is beautiful. My queerness is beautiful. It's a part of me. I am it, and that will become, I guess, then that will become the truth that your body experiences. That's the one part of it. The other part is that you must practice it in community. Community is really important. And yeah, the one place I really saw that was, I used to be part of a queer group under COVID we started. That was kind of looking at looking at Cape Town and seeing where are there spaces for queer people who are like trying to escape religious shame, actually. But the specific event which I think of in regards to this practice of undoing shame, of becoming home in your body was, so we would meet regularly and we would just reflect. But this particular week, we put some objects in the middle of the room and you associate them. So I had a chicken of fear, a butternut of pleasure and liberation, something of anger, a hammer of anger, something of shame, something of fear. Anyway, then we just put out the question, like, to quite a large group, let's talk about sex as queer people. And for the next 2 hours, people just walked in and picked up different objects and spoke about their feelings and their experiences. Pretty much everyone picked up shame, I don't remember what the object was, and fear and anger. Very few people picked up the butternut of pleasure and liberation, which I thought was interesting. I listened to a podcast the other day where they were talking actually about this and saying that, talking about the practicing of pleasure as the journey of healing, which I think fits in, right? It's like giving your nervous system experiences of pleasure of that thing that you've been ashamed of, so that it becomes something that's pleasurable, and that is the journey of healing. Yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
That's super powerful and liberating, like the potential for healing, or that we hold the potential for healing despite the trauma. And Thami, you as part of your work, I think you do some of this as part of your work in the world about, I think we called it healing melodies. But I feel like the framework Zach set out, the embodied feeling of shame that you said there's a potential to recode your body in a way. And I do wonder about what those tools then would be. Like, how do you go about, some of it is practice, the kind of experiencing the pleasure and that kind of, and I guess that can take on many different forms. You do something quite specific, I guess, with music. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, so I think with music, it's just, discovering that like sound has the ability to really speak to one's soul in a way that can be liberating and liberative. And I think I discovered that, like, especially, I think post lockdown and like, around the time when there was a lot going on around things coming up or things being revealed around injustice and all of that, and the general overwhelm that comes from like just living in this world and having to resist, and doing the work of really advocating and being in spaces that advocate for goodness and liberation, and then also feeling like, well, I just need spaces to kind of like heal and or just like receive. Like I came into longing for that for myself in a way, that led me to experimenting with like sound and music in a way. Let's experiment and see, and discovering that this was actually like, okay, this is soothing. And when you listen to a song, when you take a moment, you're taking a moment to sit and pause and reflect and check in with yourself. And it's music and melodies that can lead you there sometimes in ways that other things maybe can't. It's just another thing that we can use to get there, to check in and stuff. So
Do you think that music could maybe even help, from what Zach was saying, recode us in certain ways?
There is that potential in sound for us to receive forms of healing that are just like organic and natural. Like, so it's in music, it's in natural sounds from natural elements. People go on walks and water, like going to the ocean, and soundscapes are these things and the elements that are natural forms of frequencies that can really serve as potentially things that heal us, and then they can also be captured in a way that sounds like a full-on song or whatever.
So we can rest.
And I was just thinking of life, like as one of, I guess, a part of this goodness, perhaps that comes from being in our bodies, belonging in our bodies, and learning to belong in communities as well, as people who belong in our bodies. And I was thinking, like, okay, for someone who's present in their body and learning to belong and cultivating that, I feel like life would be so good, or is probably, I'm saying it would be because I'm probably not someone who lives in my body that much, but I feel like it's that your experience of life can be so good and so like vibrant, as opposed to if you're disembodied, you're just like going through the motions, and there's not that life that I guess comes. So I just wanted to.
I once worked on a book I did the illustrations for a book that was about leadership that generates life, but the whole metaphor of the book was based on the canal, and basically it was this whole thing, because it used to just be cement, concrete, tar, but then Friends of the Leesbeek, they, like years ago, they started drilling holes into the concrete, and maybe they added a few like rocks just to add some riffles, which is I think that's a thing that's, I don't know, known in river health. I did my bio grade 11 science fair project on it. But basically what happens is, as soon as you've poked holes in the concrete, then there's space for, and rocks for riffles and little spaces for things to like hide under. Suddenly there's space for life to take a hold. The idea of that book was saying life knows how to happen. And maybe the work is just poking holes and hoping that life takes a hold.
That was brilliant. Thanks, Thami. Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to end this episode slightly differently than usual. And Thami has agreed to share one of her songs with us. So, Thami, do you mind introducing that as a way of ending this?
Yeah, so it doesn't have a name as yet, but inspired by my love or my recent exploration of the uhadi, which is a Xhosa traditional instrument, and just hearing the sound of this instrument inspired me to write a song that can maybe be a catalyst to finding a moment to sit and breathe and reflect. So you're invited to hold that posture as you listen.